Hey guys, tonight we drift deep into a fog-wrapped little village somewhere along the Red River Delta where time doesn't tick, it lingers. There are no wall clocks here, no calendar apps, no paper grids taped to the back of doors, just the moon, the mist, and the way the morning smoke curls out of the thatch roof kitchens like someone exhaling between dreams. And fair warning if you're the kind of person who gets stressed by vague seasonal metaphors and decisions based entirely on how frogs sound after rain, you probably won't survive this. You'll be chronologically disoriented within 5 minutes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're nodding off from. Now just dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake just before sunrise, not because an alarm tells you to, but because the air tells your skin it's time. That slight dip in the temperature, the way the bamboo screens sway just a little more loosely than they did the night before. A rooster calls once, just once, and then goes silent again, satisfied that he's fulfilled the first part of his job. You step out into morning mist so thick it hums, it clings to your sleeves, it beads on your eyebrows, it smells of cool soil and last night's cooking fire. This isn't just morning, it's the first signal. Mainstream fact. In many ancient Vietnamese villages, daily life didn't rely on mechanical timekeeping. Instead, it followed a blend of environmental cues, folk beliefs, and collective memory. Sunrise and moon phases set the rhythm, but so did rituals, sounds, and even smells. You pass your neighbour, who's standing barefoot in his courtyard staring at the sky like it owes him an explanation. He nods at you and mutters something about the moon being too fat for a Tuesday. You have no idea what that means, but you nod back because he clearly does. The moon still hovers in the pale sky, just above the treetops, swollen and drowsy. You realise right, this is early third phase moon, the one that makes fish taste slightly saltier and bamboo shoots tougher to slice. Historians still argue whether these lunar-based observations were formally tracked or simply passed down through lived habit. But either way, they worked. The village didn't need printed months, it had patterns. And speaking of patterns, the smoke from breakfast fires has started to rise. That's another cue. The way it drifts not straight up, but eastward in a long tail means there's a light wind from the mountains, which means the sticky rice will cook slower today, which means the elders will gather later, around noon, instead of mid-morning, which means you have time to stop by the river first. You smile, because in this village, you never ask, what time is it? You ask, has the smoke begun to lean? Fringe tidbit. Some older villagers swore they could tell the day of the week just by the pitch of the rooster's second crow. No one could confirm it, but the rooster seemed awfully confident about it. You step barefoot into the red dirt road, wrapped in a silence that isn't really silence. It's the low hum of a place that doesn't need clocks because it remembers everything. No rush, no appointments, just signs. The mist begins to lift. The moon tucks itself behind a cloud like a curtain drawing closed. And time, as always, begins again. You follow the soft crunch of your own footsteps as the mist begins to lift just enough to reveal the slow bend of the river, wide and brown and breathing like something ancient. The water never hurries. It doesn't sparkle like the stories say rivers should. It glides, heavy with silt and secrets. And if you ask the right elder, they'll tell you. The river knows what season it is before the trees do. You don't need a calendar to tell you it's rice washing season. You can tell because the water is just murky enough, not from rain but from the churn of feet and paddles, of bundles being soaked and scrubbed in woven baskets. The colour of the river tells you more than a day ever could. Mainstream fact: in ancient Vietnamese villages, rivers served as both lifeline and temporal indicator. Their water levels, clarity, and current flow informed locals when to plant, when to fish, and when to rest. No formal date was needed, just observation. You crouch by the edge of the water, watching a woman rinse fabric dyed with indigo. She doesn't look at you. She's watching the ripples, the way they scatter against the banks and then realign. You think she's looking at nothing. She's actually checking the week. Because here's the thing, the river doesn't just move, it shifts character. On days with certain winds, it coils tighter. On others, it flattens like a sleeping buffalo. And those are the days when the elders say, time to feed the ducks earlier, or no gathering today, the river's too thin in the ankles. Fringe tidbit: one village was known for using river sound recordings as a form of folk archiving. Instead of writing down dates, they kept recordings of how the water sounded during key events. The wedding of the twins. One file was labelled, "When the river hummed like bees." A boat slides past nothing more than a few planks lashed with string, carrying baskets of jackfruit and dried fish. The oarsman nods at you without speaking. You notice he's wearing his narrow-brimmed hat low over his brow, tied tight under the chin. That means the southern wind is coming today, probably by late afternoon, which means the tide will shift around sunset, which means the shrine keepers will close early. And all of that tells you without a single number printed anywhere that it is a Thursday. Or, at least, what this village has always agreed to call Thursday. Historians still argue whether such timekeeping systems were unique to each village or part of a broader, undocumented oral tradition. Some say these patterns were standardized across regions. Others insist each village read its world like a personal horoscope written by moss and frogs. You lean forward and let the edge of the river wet your fingers. It's warm, which means the sun is climbing already. You can't see it yet, but the heat curling off the water is enough to tell you that the first batch of steamed rice should be ready by the time you return. And sure enough, as you rise, you hear it the soft clack of wooden lids being lifted from cooking pots. Breakfast is beginning, because the river said it was time. Not your wrist. Not a bell. Just that endless body of moving silence. That muddy calendar that never needed a grid. And as you walk away, you feel it behind you, patient and ancient and entirely on time. The path crunches beneath your sandals as you head toward the edge of the village, where the bamboo stands so still it looks like it's listening. The stalks are tall, too tall to count, and clustered like old men at a tea house, leaning in but never quite touching. And there, in the hush beneath their emerald canopies, you pause. Because the bamboo is creaking, not groaning, not bending in the wind, just that signature, rhythmic creak like someone opening a heavy gate in slow motion. It's not constant, it's seasonal. You smile, because the bamboo has just told you it's harvest time. Mainstream fact: in many Vietnamese villages, groves of bamboo weren't just used for building, fencing, or food, they also acted as acoustic barometers. The tension inside the stalks would respond audibly to humidity and temperature shifts, especially during transitions between agricultural phases. The elders say when the bamboo creaks 3 mornings in a row, the first rice sheaves must be cut before the 4th, and not because of some mythic curse though, Yes, there's also a mythic curse, but because after that, the stalks get too dry, the bugs come out hungry, and the village mill starts coughing up dust instead of flour. Fringe tidbit. Some villagers believed that if the bamboo creaked at night, it meant a dispute was brewing in the market. Others believed it was the spirits whispering through the hollow stems to let you know someone forgot to bless the tools. You reach out and touch one of the stalks. It's smooth and cool, despite the warmth of the day, and you notice the rings have lightened, almost silver. That, too, is a signal. The stalks only bleach like that when the rice fields turn golden. It's time. No one's shouted it from the rooftops. No bells have rung. But the grandmothers are already dragging baskets from under the house stilts. The children are being told to find their sandals, and somewhere down the road, a man with a sickle is tying back his hair. Because the bamboo creaked. Historians still debate how much of this acoustic timekeeping was superstition, and how much was environmental literacy. Some scholars argue that it's just coincidence. Others suggest that generations of careful observation turned coincidence into a system far older than anything carved into a royal calendar. You continue walking, and the wind nudges the bamboo again. Creak, pause, creak, and you wonder how many centuries that sound has carried instructions. How many decisions when to plant, when to build, when to marry were whispered through these green columns long before ink ever touched scroll. No one ever says it aloud, but everyone agrees when the bamboo speaks. You listen. Not because it's magic, but because it's accurate. You pass a neighbour inspecting a roof. She nods, says nothing, but her hands move with urgency. The bamboo creaked. You keep going. Past the small altar near the water basin, where the incense leans just slightly west. Past the sleeping dog who, for once, doesn't even open an eye. Because the whole village is already pivoting. Not in panic. In rhythm. There's something soothing about it. The way no one has to be told, no leaflets, no shouted announcements, just a gentle agreement between people and plants. And as you round the last bend toward your home, you hear it again, softer now, like the bamboo is exhaling. The third creak. And that means tomorrow. It begins. You wake the next day to a smell that's hard to describe, something between damp sandalwood and freshly churned earth. It's not unpleasant, just specific. The kind of scent that drapes itself over the village like a shawl and tells you without a word you're halfway through something. And here, that something is the week. Mainstream fact. Ancient Vietnamese villagers often gauge the passage of days using sensory shifts, including smell, soil moisture, cooking smoke, and plant oils released at certain times combined to form what anthropologists call a scent-based rhythm. No clocks, just noses. You sit on the front step, cup of tea in hand, breathing in the faint humidity. The dirt in front of your house is darker than yesterday, not from rain, but from the subtle sweat of the earth. That means the paddies are turning under themselves, the worms are coming closer to the surface, and the air is rich with the kind of organic chatter that says, we're mid-cycle. You don't check a calendar, you check your sandals. If they pick up a dry crumble of soil, it's likely early in the cycle. If they pick up sticky clumps with a slight metallic tang like today, it's halfway. Midweek. You take a sip of tea and glance down the path. A woman is rinsing cassava roots by hand. Her movement's slower than yesterday's. Her cat follows, trailing one paw in the wet soil and stopping to sniff the ground animals here, also obey the soil's language. Fringe tidbit. Some elders claimed that the scent of the soil could even predict arguments. If it smells sour before dinner, one man said, don't bring up the boundary line with your neighbour. The idea of the scent calendar isn't poetic embellishment, it's functional. You grew up learning the smells of first rice, of end-of-season yam, of soil that had woken up too soon, which usually meant an early rain was coming. No one taught you with flashcards. You learned the way you learned to balance on a bicycle by falling into it. Historians still argue whether these scent-based traditions were structured or just instinctual. Were they ritual superstition or just unwritten science? You glance at your neighbour's fire pit. The smoke curls differently today, lower, slower, sticking to the tree trunks before rising. That's another sign. When the smoke hesitates like that, it means the underground heat is building. It's time to air out the grain baskets or mould will settle by evening. You make a note to do that. With your nose. Not your planner. Because in this village, no one ever says Wednesday. They say it smells like mid-soil. You pass by the shrine on your way to the paddies. The incense from yesterday has melted into the earth and left a faint resinous trace, like pine and pepper. The old monk who tends the shrine doesn't even look up. He just mutters, the soil's sticky today. Don't harvest the low rows. You nod, because he's right. He's always right when he says that. Fringe tidbit. Some travelling scholars tried to disprove the village's soil scent calendar, but every time they tried to conduct an experiment, the locals gave them such accurate predictions that one scholar reportedly abandoned his notes and became a rice farmer. You pause at the edge of a flooded field. Dragonflies hover low, skimming the surface with their wings angled downward. Another smell reaches you, this one warm and mineral rich, like rust in a cooking pot. Late afternoon rain. You'd bet your lunch on it. But you don't panic. You've already adjusted. Because when you live in a village like this, time isn't measured in minutes. It's steeped, infused, smelled before it's seen. And on days like this, the earth speaks loudest. You just have to breathe it in. The frogs start early tonight. Not the occasional lazy croak you hear on damp evenings, but a full-throated amphibian opera. 1 minute it's quiet, and the next it's like the fields have decided to host a concert for mud and moonlight. You sit up from your mat and listen, because this is not just noise. This is a message. Mainstream fact. Ancient Vietnamese villages often used animal behaviours, especially sound, to keep track of time and seasons. Frogs, cicadas, and even crickets were seen as auditory indicators of everything from crop readiness to festival timing. You open the door to your stilted house and step out into the soft night air. The sound is coming from the western paddies. That means the frogs there are swelling with fresh water, probably a runoff from the hills. That means more mosquitoes tomorrow, which means it's the third night of the wet wave. It's not on any paper calendar, but the villagers know it as the time when certain herbs should be harvested and left to dry before sunrise, or else they'll mould. You mentally make a note, tell Aunt Lan to bring down her drying mats. Fringe tidbit. There's a long-held belief that if the frogs stop suddenly after 3 consecutive nights of singing, someone is about to propose marriage. No one knows why, but statistically, it's weirdly accurate. You walk toward the edge of the village where the frogs are loudest. Along the way, you hear a second layer of rhythm join the chorus. Click, 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 the sound of cicadas warming up in the mango trees. If frogs are the village's night bell, cicadas are the hour markers. You pause under the tree and count. 12 clicks per cycle, which means the moon has passed the high mark, which means it's now the traditional night middle, when grandmothers get up quietly and sip warm tea and definitely talk to ghosts. You keep walking, and somewhere to your left, a rooster lets out a single confused crow. You stop, because that's not supposed to happen. Historians still debate the phenomenon of false crows, roosters crowing outside their usual pre-dawn patterns. Some claim it was a reaction to barometric pressure, others say it was social contagion among roosters seriously. But in villages like yours, a rogue crow means tomorrow will be early. You glance at the sky. The moon is crooked, one of those uneven crescents that looks like it's trying not to laugh. The frogs grow louder, a breeze picks up, and you realise it, yes. Tomorrow's market will begin before sunrise. Because the animals already voted. You hear another rooster crow, this time farther off, and someone from across the fields calls out, "Make sure your baskets are tied," which is code for "the buyers will come early. Don't get caught sipping tea when you should be counting beans." Fringe tidbit. Some elders could distinguish individual frog species by pitch, and use them to determine which corner of the fields needed drainage. One famously fussy herbalist was nicknamed Three Frog Min for his habit of checking frogs before writing anything on his almanac scroll. You start walking back, but slower now, because the sounds are everywhere and they're layered. Frogs for the season, cicadas for the hour, a lone rooster to rattle the schedule, and deep in the night air, the faint pat-pat of someone's sandals running, probably to wake a sleepy cousin who forgot to soak the soybeans. You don't rush. You don't worry. Because in this village, you're not ruled by seconds or numbers. You're ruled by rhythm. And rhythm doesn't need batteries. It needs ears. So you head back to your house, crawl under the mosquito net, and listen. The frogs don't stop. The cicadas slow. And the night tells you, gently, what time it is. At the first sliver of dawn, you hear the unmistakable creak of an old back stretching somewhere across the lane, followed by the shuffle of slippers and a sigh that's probably older than the village itself. It's Grandma Nan. She's already outside, already holding a cup of tea so hot it's more steam than liquid, and already grumbling softly about the humidity in her ankles. Which, as you've learned, means rain in 3 days. Mainstream fact. In many traditional Vietnamese communities, elders were treated not just as respected figures, but as living seasonal instruments. Their physical sensations, joint stiffness, toothaches, sinus pressure were used to forecast environmental changes with surprising accuracy. You join her, bowing slightly, and sit down on the low bamboo stool beside her. She doesn't look at you. She's busy eyeing the horizon like it just said something rude. Finally, she mutters, "The clouds are sitting funny, just like before the peach harvest of '62. Which, by the way, this was legendary. She taps her knee and clicks her tongue twice, something between a complaint and a weather bulletin, and you know the meaning the rains will come, but not all at once. Probably scattered, probably inconvenient. Fringe tidbit. One grandmother in a neighbouring village was nicknamed Creaky Oracle because every time her left shoulder popped, the price of fish in the market mysteriously dropped. The local boys eventually began betting on her joints. Grandma Nan shifts her weight and lifts her other foot, examining the calloused arch like it holds a barometer. Then she announces, "My heel's too cold, we'll need to pull the rice early." That seals it. The news will travel fast through gestures, through tea, through the invisible current that binds a place where conversation replaces clockwork. Historians still argue whether these so-called body calendars were superstition or learned pattern recognition. But there's enough anecdotal data to suggest that when old bones groaned in a certain way, people changed their plans. You glance down at your own hands, still smooth, still young. But one day, you'll feel the twinge in your knuckles and know what to do. Grandma Nan sips her tea and mutters about how the earth's been too itchy lately, another phrase that somehow means the ants have been rebuilding their mounds, which means the underground water is shifting, which means the snakes will move soon. And when the snakes move, you don't till the lower rows of the field. You just don't. She stands up, slowly, then begins checking the herbs hanging from her porch rafters. She pokes a bundle of dried ginger root and sniffs the air. You follow her lead. There's something sharp in the breeze now, something almost sour. Too much wind from the east, she says, shaking her head. Tamarind will flower late. You nod solemnly. You have no idea if she's right, but she always is. Fringe tidbit. Some elders in the Mekong Delta could apparently sense changes in tide pressure by how heavy their heads felt in the morning. One even claimed she got drunk off the sea air the night before a flood. Grandma Nun picks up her broom not to sweep but to point. There, she says, gesturing toward a banana tree whose leaves are drooping in an oddly respectful bow. That one's tired. We'll get 2 dry days. Then the sky will spit. A poetic way of saying plan your laundry carefully. And you do. Not because you saw the weather forecast. Because an 80-year-old woman just read your week through her hip socket. You help her down the steps, and she waves you off, grumbling something about young people always in a rush, even though you've been standing still for 20 minutes. But you feel the shift now. The air heavier. The soil warmer. The sky less blue. All signs that your joints will one day hum with this same music. And when they do, you'll listen. Because in this village, the body doesn't age out of timekeeping. It becomes the clock. You're lying in the shade after lunch. The kind of full-bellied, sweat-slick stillness that only happens when the sun has turned the entire village into a slow-cooked stew. Even the chickens have given up on pretending to be productive. They squat in the dust like small feathered retirees. The air doesn't move. The leaves don't whisper. Time itself seems to have stepped outside for a nap. And then smoke. Not the thick, choking kind. This is gentler, a ribbon, really. It coils from the neighbour's hearth and stretches into the sky like it's pointing to something you can't quite see. You squint at it, then roll onto your side. Because here, smoke doesn't just signal food, it marks the hour. Mainstream fact. In pre-modern Vietnamese villages, smoke from kitchen hearths and temple incense was used as a visual timekeeping method. The way it drifted its shape, direction, and even colour told villagers everything from the hour of day to the next chore of the schedule. Your grandmother used to say, when the smoke curls like a snake, it's time to rinse the beans. When it stands tall like a bamboo stalk, the gods are paying attention, and if it splits before it rises, go back to sleep. You're not ready for the day yet. You watch your neighbour fan her coals, adjusting the flame with the same concentration most people reserve for surgery. The resulting trail of smoke leans sharply to the left, east wind, mid-afternoon, time to fetch water before the well shadow hits. Fringe tidbit. Some families had smoke readers, usually an elder aunt or uncle, who could walk through the village at midday and shout out the time based solely on the shape of everyone's cooking trails. They were weirdly accurate and only slightly dramatic. And then there's the incense. You pass a small altar by the banyan tree, where 3 sticks smoulder in perfect formation. Each releases a faint shimmering trail of scented smoke that dances as it climbs, twisting and pulling toward the southwest. That's not just wind. That's meaning. Because incense smoke was never just spiritual, it was practical. The monks knew how long it took for a particular stick to burn down, almost to the minute. Morning prayer, 3 inches of jasmine resin. Noon, offering 1 coil of sandalwood. Funeral rites, a rare bitter wood that takes exactly 87 minutes to consume itself. Historians still debate whether incense timing was formalized or just intuitive, but many agree that for villages without bells or gongs, burning things was the closest thing to a clock. And not just when to act, but what kind of day it was. You remember once, as a child, running up to your uncle asking if it was time to eat. He didn't check the sun, he didn't ask the neighbours, he sniffed the air, looked up at the nearest trail of smoke and said, "Almost. Go find your mother. She's waiting on the eggplant." And he was right. Fringe tidbit. Some older houses had tiny holes in the roof beams, not for ventilation, but to let incense smoke drift upward and cast shadows on a ceiling beam marked with faint notches. A literal smoke clock. You rise from your nap and follow the newest trail drifting toward the river. The smoke is thinner now, paler, almost ghost-like. That means the cooking fire is dying down. That means afternoon is ending. That means if you want your sweet rice pudding while it's still warm, you'd better go now. You pass the neighbour's house just as she lifts the pot from the fire, and sure enough, the scent of sticky rice and coconut milk slaps you in the face like a polite invitation. You smile, bow slightly, and she hands you a bowl without a word. Because the smoke already told her you were coming. You eat it on the porch as the light changes. The sun fades. The smoke vanishes. And just like that, the hour turns over. No chimes. No bells. Just a curl of incense and the fading memory of fire. You wake to the hollow knock of bamboo on stone 3 times. No more, no less, and roll out of bed before your brain even finishes booting up. That sound means one thing: market day. Specifically, the 5th day. Counted not on a calendar but by the sacred basket now sitting outside the village shrine, full of yams and judgment. Mainstream fact: in traditional Vietnamese villages, markets didn't follow fixed dates on a national calendar. Instead, many used rotating rituals, including communal baskets placed at shrines or village gates, to track cyclical gatherings and collective events. This particular basket is no ordinary woven bowl. It's round, shallow, and laced with dyed threads that have long faded to sun-bleached whispers. It sits quietly on its stone pedestal beneath the shrine's sloping roof, and it doesn't move, not on its own. But every 5th morning, someone finds it restocked. No one knows who does it. No one asks. If the basket is full, market day has returned. You trudge barefoot toward the shrine with sleep still clinging to your elbows, and there it is, 3 bulbs of garlic, 1 sprig of basil, and exactly 7 shallots. That's it. That's the signal. You nod solemnly and turn around, because it's time to prepare your eggs. Fringe tidbit: one village insisted that if the basket was stocked before the first bird sang, the market would end in arguments. To prevent this, they appointed a songbird listener who wasn't allowed to sleep before verifying the precise timing of the first chirp. You cross paths with your cousin, who's already tying bundles of lemongrass together with twine. She lifts her eyebrows at you. "Did the garlic have stems?" she asks. You nod. She grins. "Then bring extra chilies. Spicy days sell better." This is what passes for schedule coordination. There's no app, no board, no poster nailed to the village tree. Just the basket. And everyone understands. Historians still argue whether these systems originated from agricultural necessity or animist tradition. Some scholars say it was a way to sync labour in a community without written communication. Others believe it was a form of seasonal worship disguised as logistics. You enter your house and start gathering duck eggs into a straw-lined crate. You add a small jar of fermented tofu and a bundle of pickled bamboo shoots. Your aunt, already combing her hair in the corner, doesn't look up when she says, "Don't bring the fish. The wind came from the north last night. They'll taste like the river." You don't argue, because she's right. And because if you bring stinky fish to the fifth day market, you'll be shamed for a month. You walk toward the centre of the village, where stalls are being unfolded like lazy origami, bamboo mats, rickety tables, hanging scarves that dance in the breeze. A child is already chewing on a sugarcane stalk the length of his arm. Two grandmothers are pretending not to haggle over rice prices while absolutely haggling over rice prices. And above it all the basket remains. Now empty, its contents claimed, its message delivered. Fringe tidbit. Some villagers believed that a single red chili left in the basket meant a warning that someone was cheating in the market or failing to pay shrine dues. The last time it happened, a fish vendor disappeared for 2 weeks. He returned with an apology and a goat. You set up your crate and nod to the vendors on either side. No one needs to introduce themselves. No one says, "Wow, can you believe it's been 5 days already?" Because everyone knows. The rhythm is set not by numbers, but by repetition, by motion, by shared silence and a basket that fills itself while no one is looking. You make your first sale just as the sun tips into the sky, and your customer smiles at you like this is just another Tuesday. It's not, but also it is, because the basket says so. And here, that's all the confirmation anyone needs. The sun is starting to yawn its way toward the western treetops, stretching long shadows across the dirt road that curves behind the shrine. You're walking home, your basket lighter, your pockets heavier, and the sky painted in that syrupy gold that makes everything feel like it's being remembered before it's even finished. You pause at your door and glance to the east-facing wall of your house, the lantern wall. That's not what anyone calls it out loud, but that's what it is. Every evening, just as the day exhales, this wall becomes your own personal, improvised clock. Mainstream fact: in pre-modern Vietnamese homes, the shape and direction of shadows cast by lanterns at dusk were sometimes used as informal time markers. The placement of paper lanterns and the angle of their glow helped villagers determine when to eat, pray, or rest. You light the lantern just as your mother did, just as your grandmother did before her. It's small and round, made from oiled rice paper and reeds. The flame inside is lazy, flickering with the unbothered confidence of something that knows exactly where it belongs. You hang it from the nail that was hammered into place long before you were born. Same height, same spot, and then you wait. As the flame steadies, it throws a warm oval of light against the wall. Right now, the shadow arcs sharply downward, curving like a sleeping dragon's tail. That means it's the second hour before full nightfall, just enough time to finish dinner, sweep the walkway, and decide if you're going to bathe or pretend you already did. Fringe tidbit. Some elders claim that if your lantern cast a shadow that touched the edge of your rice bin, it meant your week would be prosperous. If it landed on your broom instead, you were overdue for a difficult conversation. One uncle solved this by moving his broom every night. You head inside and start preparing your evening meal. The oil sizzles in the pan, and the fish sauce fills the room like a spicy memory. Through the window, the lantern's glow stays constant. You glance out every few minutes, not because you're worried, but because the shadow is shifting. As it moves, it flattens. Soon it will rest low and wide like a stretched scroll. That's your cue time to lay the mats out. You call to your sister. She appears already holding the teacups. No one spoke of timing. No one had to. Historians still debate whether lantern shadow timekeeping was formal practice, or just a lucky coincidence of architecture and routine. But in some families, it was as structured as any mechanical clock lantern, lit at the same height, same wall, same time every evening. If you deviated, the day felt off. You eat slowly. You drink tea even slower. And all the while, the glow on the wall tells you how much evening is left. The light begins to bend. The edges soften. And then, just as the sky turns from orange to a velvet grey, the lantern shadow vanishes entirely. That's the signal. Not that it's bedtime, but that the day is closed. No more bartering. No more chores. Just crickets, stars, and the quiet hum of neighbours closing their own doors. Fringe tidbit one wandering monk once said he could tell the time in any house by asking to see where the lantern was hung. He could guess the hour by the shape of the nail-hole stains. He never stayed in one place more than a week. You step outside for one last breath of air before sleep. The lantern still burns, but softer now, more whisper than glow. It no longer casts time. Now, it just keeps you company. You take it down, gently, and carry it to its place beside your mat. Because here you don't count hours. You watch them fade. You wake before the light does, not because anything startles you, but because something inside you quietly decides now. You sit up slowly, blankets sliding from your shoulders like old rice husks, and feel it even before you look outside. The air is different. There's a stillness you can't quite explain. The frogs are quieter. The cicadas haven't warmed up yet. Even the dogs are pretending to be statues. It's not silence, it's anticipation. And that can mean only one thing: the rice is about to bloom. Mainstream fact: in traditional Vietnamese farming communities, the growth phases of rice paddies served as the most important markers of time, eclipsing calendars entirely. The entire year was structured around rice, its planting, tending, blooming, and harvesting. You step outside and gaze at the fields. The paddies shimmer under a thin skin of water, barely rippling, and the stalks are straight-backed and alert. Then you spot it, the first pale green tips, feathering at the top like shy confessions. The rice is flowering. Not fully, not loudly, but enough for those who are paying attention. Fringe tidbit: there's an old saying, when the rice bows, the year is kind. It's a reference to the way blooming rice bends gently under its own weight. Villagers could predict the next season's luck based on how low the rice leaned by morning mist. And this morning, the rice is holding a graceful, deliberate curve, which means it's the 6th cycle, give or take, in the planting rhythm. Not that anyone counts in numbers, you just feel it. The same way you can tell when a pot is about to boil just by the sound it makes, or when your friend is about to sneeze just by how their eyes look. The blooming means everything shifts today. Cooking oil will be used more sparingly. Offerings at the shrine will include raw grains instead of polished ones. and the older women will start soaking their bamboo combs in warm water, readying for the next phase of weaving season. Because once rice flowers, it announces a new chapter. You walk along the paddies with your cousin, who carries a small tin of duck eggs balanced on her head. She squints at the sky, then at the rice, then at her feet. 3 days, she says. That's when it'll really bloom. You nod. 4 if it rains. She shrugs, not with the birds this quiet. You hear that? You listen. Exactly. Nothing. No birds means the air is waiting. When the birds go silent, the plants take their turn. It's one of the unspoken rules of the village. No one knows who figured it out first, but it's never been wrong. Historians still argue how much of this was intentional observation versus cultural storytelling. But even the most skeptical researchers admit these communities got their harvests in on time. Every time, without so much as a wristwatch. You crouch and touch the rice stalks. They feel cool and strong like bone after a rain. The tips smell faintly of green onions and tea steam, and if you really concentrate, you can almost hear them shifting under the sun, growing one sigh at a time. Fringe tidbit. Some villagers insisted rice plants responded to music. There were songs sung only during blooming week, soft lullabies hummed by women as they walked between rows. Not for the rice, they'd say, for the wind listening over the rice. As the sun rises higher, the stalks begin to shine, not like metal, but like silk stretched over bamboo frames. And that means it's time to gather the offerings. Because today rice is sacred. Not just for eating, for timing. And you must honour the first bloom. You return home, gather a handful of uncooked grains in a small woven pouch, and place it gently at the family altar, beside the incense and betel leaves. You bow twice, then once again for the season, because when the rice begins to bloom, everything bends with it. Even time. You're rinsing rice in a clay bowl when you notice the dragonflies. Not just 1 or 2 dozens, maybe more darting and weaving just inches above the water in synchronized chaos. They dip low, then rise suddenly in a curve, like they're chasing invisible currents no one else can see. You stop what you're doing, hands dripping, and just watch. 'Cause this isn't random. This is a seasonal telegram. Mainstream fact. In rural Vietnamese tradition, the appearance and behavior of dragonflies were considered reliable signs of seasonal transition, especially the beginning of spring or the tail end of the cold months. Villagers used them to track shifts in wind, humidity, and even planting schedules. You walk outside with the bowl still in your hands, water sloshing over your fingers. The dragonflies are everywhere now, long bodies glinting like green glass in the rising sun, wings vibrating so fast they hum. You squint and tilt your head. They're flying low, very low. Your neighbour walks past, balancing 2 bundles of herbs on her shoulder pole. She doesn't stop, doesn't even greet you, just mutters, "Wet week coming." You nod, even though she's already gone. Because low-flying dragonflies always mean rain, not a storm, not a flood, just a good, cleansing wet week, the kind that brings out the worms, cools the soil, and sends the frogs into song. Fringe tidbit. Some villages had specific names for each dragonfly formation. A spiral meant good harvest. A zigzag meant an argument was coming. A still hover, no movement at all meant a funeral was on the horizon. You sit down on your porch steps and feel the air. There's dew still clinging to the grass, not just from morning, but from something heavier on its way. The dragonflies know. And now, so do you. You glance at the roofline. The tiles glisten, not wet, just moist. That invisible in-between state that only lasts a day or two, when everything feels soft around the edges. That's how you know spring is arriving. Not announced, just suggested, like the slow unfurling of a scroll. Historians still debate whether dragonfly tracking was more about superstition or observation, but when weather patterns were recorded by wings instead of thermometers, these insects were the first meteorologists and still more accurate than half the satellite apps. You finish rinsing the rice and set it out to drain. The wind picks up just enough to ruffle the corner of your neighbour's mat. And then you hear it, the soft splash of dew pooling in the crevice by your water jars. 3 drips. Then silence. Then 3 again. This rhythm is also a calendar. Fringe tidbit. In some households, women collected dew on the first day of visible dragonfly bloom and used it in washing water, believing it carried New Year luck. The water was said to smell faintly sweet, though no one could ever agree on what exactly it reminded them of. You pour a little of the dew into your own wash basin, just in case. Not because you're superstitious, just because you're attentive. And in a place like this, that's the same thing. A rooster crows once, sleepily. The dragonflies rise higher. And just like that, you know spring has tipped over from theory to fact. No festival, no temple gone. Just wings and water and the kind of morning that whispers its arrival. You return inside to light incense at the altar. Because today isn't just any day. It's the first real breath of the new season. And here, that's worth acknowledging even if the calendar hasn't caught up. The festival doesn't start with a drum or a trumpet or even an enthusiastic neighbour yelling about rice wine. It starts with a pebble, one small, dark, perfectly round river pebble, placed just off-centre on the village altar like an inside joke that's been running for generations. No banner, no countdown, just the pebble. And everyone knows what it means. Mainstream fact. In some traditional Vietnamese villages, certain festivals weren't tethered to lunar calendars or fixed seasons, but were triggered by ritual cues often obscure. Symbolic gestures like a rearranged altar item, a rotated sculpture, or, in one well-documented case, the silent appearance of a marked stone. You walk past the shrine and catch it out of the corner of your eye. You stop, you blink, you tilt your head, and yes, there it is. The 5th pebble, placed carefully next to the brass incense bowl. Which means the Lejatunam has begun. Festival of the 5th pebble. It sounds made up. It kind of is. And yet, it's real. Fringe tidbit. In one village near the Central Highlands, this pebble-based ritual was so secretive that not even the local magistrate knew who placed the stone. Every year he tried to find out. Every year, the pebble beat him to the altar. No one can explain what the festival celebrates. It's not a harvest. It's not a birthday. It's not tied to any moon phase anyone can trace. But when the pebble appears, the rules change. Children are allowed to skip their chores, but only until noon. Elders get the best tea first. And no shoes are to be worn while walking past the bamboo grove until the sun sets. You think that last one was made up by Grandma Zhao, but no one wants to test it. You step into the market square and find it already transforming. Someone has painted spirals on the stone bench. Someone else has filled a woven tray with exactly 9 bananas, one of which is suspiciously smaller than the others. That's part of the ritual too. It's the mischief day. Fringe tidbit. According to tradition, if you're caught working on the festival of the fifth pebble, you owe the altar one story, not a sacrifice. Just a story told out loud to a listening rock at dusk. You head back home, passing kids who are running sideways in a circle, possibly for fun, possibly because someone told them that's how the spirits laugh. It's not in any scroll. It's not even in village memory in the normal sense. But it's in the pebble, which has appeared on the altar for as long as anyone can remember. You find your uncle carving a radish into something vaguely bird-like. He glances at you. Pebble showed up. You nod. He grins. Well, guess I'm not fixing the fence today. You sit together in the shade, watching the day unfold like a slow fan. People bring bowls of sticky rice. Some bring ginger candy. Some bring folded paper fish and pretend not to care who's watching. No one says happy holiday. No one announces a ceremony. But everyone is smiling a little differently, walking a little slower, eyes darting toward the altar now and then just to check. The sun begins to dip, and just before it vanishes, the pebble is gone. Not taken, just gone. Everyone sees it. No one says anything. That's part of the ritual too. Because once the fifth pebble disappears, the next week begins. Not Monday, not Sunday. Just after the pebble, you light a small lantern, place it by your doorway and sit beside it. Tomorrow will feel normal again. But for today, you belong to something old, something quiet, something that told time not by numbers but by stone. Just before dawn, you hear it a low, breathy snort from somewhere near the riverbank. Then a pause. Then the unmistakable squelch of heavy hooves in mud. You don't sit up yet. You already know what this means. The wandering buffalo has returned. Mainstream fact. In various Vietnamese rural traditions, it was common for semi-wild buffalo to roam freely through fields and forests during parts of the year. Their return to the village often marked a seasonal shift, particularly the end of late summer and the beginning of the pre-harvest cycle. You shuffle out from under your mat, stretch one arm overhead, and squint through the window. There it is, a massive, muddy, slow-moving beast standing near the banana trees like it owns the place, which, to be fair, it kind of does. Its hide is streaked with dried river sediment. A dragonfly hitches a ride on its back. Fringe tidbit. Some villagers believe that if the buffalo returned before the 7th morning mist, the harvest would come early. If it arrived late, you were supposed to blame the blacksmith. No one remembers why. Just blame the blacksmith. You open the door just as 3 kids sprint past barefoot, yelling, "Ong bo vey, ong bo vey. Uncle Buffalo is back." You watch as they pelt toward the creature with offerings, 1 stalk of sugar cane, a bundle of banana leaves, and a lopsided straw hat. The buffalo accepts these tributes with total indifference. You smile, because this isn't just a wandering animal. It's a calendar event. The village has waited for this exact moment without talking about it, without planning for it, and yet, now that it's here, everyone knows what to do. The old men gather near the water jug outside the tea house. One mutters, "His left horn's more crooked this year." Another squints and replies, "Means a windy harvest. Hope your roof tiles are still tied." Historians still argue whether these buffalo traditions stem from agricultural necessity or symbolic storytelling. Was the return of the buffalo an actual environmental cue, or just a memorable coincidence? Either way, it worked. because within the hour, the entire rhythm of the village shifts. Women begin pulling sacks of rice husks from storage. The potter lays out new jugs to sun-dry. The school teacher announces that afternoon classes are cancelled for observation of bovine phenomenon. You grab your basket and head to the small communal garden, where your cousin is already trimming lemongrass. She sees you and says, without looking up, "Did you see the mud on his tail? We've got 5 dry days left. Maybe 6. You nod, because she's probably right. Fringe tidbit. Some villages tied strips of dyed fabric to the returning buffalo's tail, then read the way they dried over the next few hours like windsocks predicting everything from rainfall to relationship gossip. Back in the square, someone starts humming the old buffalo song. It doesn't have words, just a lulling melody with too many hums and not enough tune. It's only sung today. The buffalo wanders toward the rice paddies. No one tries to stop it. It walks like something from a dream that accidentally wandered into a Tuesday. By dusk, it's already vanished again, probably off to some thicket or river bend known only to creatures with no clocks. But its message has landed. Preparations begin. Tools are checked. Altars are swept. And you find yourself folding small banana leaf packets of sweet rice, even though no one asked you to. Because the buffalo has returned, which means the season is tilting forward. No one rings a bell. No one shouts it from the rooftops. But everyone agrees, in that silent, shared language older than handwriting. Time has moved, and the hooves told you first. You're halfway through tying your bundles of lemongrass when you notice something strange: silence. Not the natural hush of early morning or the stillness of a hot afternoon. This is different. It's a kind of pause, like the village is holding its breath. You pause too. Something's missing. And then it hits you. The weaving hut is quiet. Mainstream fact. In many Vietnamese villages, textile production followed a seasonal rhythm. Weaving was more than craft, it was timekeeping. The sounds of spinning wheels, clicking looms, and swishing reed shuttles told villagers not just where they were, but when they were in the year. You put down the lemongrass and make your way toward the hut, tucked behind a line of papaya trees. Normally, it's alive by now. The thunk of the looms, a reliable beat in the morning soundtrack. A dozen women bent over fabric, feet tapping like they're keeping time for the entire village. But today, nothing. Not a single creak. Not a thread pulled. You step inside. The looms are resting still upright, threads in place, tools hung neatly, but the air has that feeling of being done, like a playhouse after the show. Lights dimmed, but costumes still draped over chairs. Fringe tidbit, one elder claimed he could tell the time of year with his eyes closed, just by counting how many looms were working. More than 7 late spring, less than 3 monsoon preparation. None. Either the rice is in bloom or someone died. In this case, it's neither. It's just time to stop weaving. Everyone knows the rule twice a year. The looms go quiet for exactly 6 days, not because of religious ritual, not even to rest, but because during these 6 days the threads shift. That's what the weavers say. The humidity changes. The fibres swell just enough to throw off the rhythm. Even the best weaver can't make a clean edge in those days. You end up with cloth that curls, patterns that blur, edges that seem uncertain. So instead of fighting the thread, they rest. And the village listens. Historians still debate whether this break was originally a practical adjustment or something more mystical. The oral tradition insists it came from observation, trial and error woven into folklore. but some argue it served a deeper social function to mark the soft turn of the year. You step outside and feel it now too. The air has that liminal quality, warmer in the shade, cooler in the sun. The wind doesn't know where it's going. Your feet leave prints in the dust, but they fade faster than usual. The looms are quiet because the world is relining. Your aunt passes you with a basket of freshly cut areca leaves. She doesn't stop, just says, "Don't sew today. It won't hold." She means it. Sljam, fringe tidbit. Some villages had a thread whisperer, a woman whose job was to inspect the fabric each day and determine if the threads were behaving. On the first day of thread refusal, she'd hang a red sash in the doorway of the weaving hut. That was the only signal they needed. You sit for a while beside the silent hut. It's strange, hearing everything except weaving. The birds sound louder. The frogs bolder. Even your own breath feels too present. But that's the point. The looms are quiet so the village can recalibrate. So the rhythm can reset. So no one tries to force beauty into threads that want to rest. You walk away with lighter steps. You'll come back in 6 days. The hut will reopen. The looms will sing again. But today, you live in the pause. Because even in a village without calendars, the silence knows exactly when to arrive. The pond is unusually lively today. You notice it first as a distant splash, then another, until it sounds like someone's tossing small stones into the water in a slow, playful rhythm. But when you arrive at the edge, there are no stones, no mischief-making children. Just fish, jumping repeatedly and precisely. Mainstream fact. In ancient Vietnamese villages, fish behaviour, particularly that of native species like carp and snakehead, was used to mark transitional weeks between dry and wet seasons. Their sudden, synchronised movements were treated as reliable time signals. You crouch by the water, elbows on knees, watching as one silvery back arcs out of the surface and lands with a splash that sends rings across the pond. A second follows, then a third. Not frantic, not random. Measured. Like they're keeping score. Fringe tidbit local legend holds that these fish are calendar spirits. They surface every year, during the same 2-week window, to confirm that the world is still spinning properly. No one knows how they tell time. No one questions it. You shade your eyes from the sun, which now hangs in the sky like an overcooked egg. The light glints off the pond in flecks of gold. You count 10 jumps in 3 minutes. That's right on schedule. This is the week of fish truth. That's what the elders call it. Not because the fish are telling you anything, but because they won't lie to the sky. If they jump, the season is turning. If they don't, something is stuck. People get nervous. Chores get rearranged. Pregnant women postpone travel. The weavers won't touch yellow dye. You sit beside an old fisherman who already beat you to the pond. He doesn't greet you, just points with his chin toward the water. See how the second jump breaks left, he asks. That means early wind. Wrap your baskets tighter. You nod solemnly. He chews a betel nut and adds, "They're early this year." You look at the fish. They don't look early. They look right on time. Historians still debate the accuracy of these observations. Some say it's environmental alignment, temperature, pressure, humidity. Others believe the timing of fish activity was simply woven into the collective expectation. Either way, the village reacts accordingly. Children are sent to collect lotus stems. Shrines are swept of any offerings made with salt because during Fish Week, nothing salted should be left outside. You turn to the fisherman again. How long do they jump for? He shrugs. Until they don't. That's the answer every year. Fringe tidbit. There's a folk tale about a man who ignored the fish signals and planted his yam too soon. Not only did it rot, but his house supposedly started smelling like boiled eggs for a week. Even now, Yam Nose is still used to mock someone who moved too fast. You sit for a while longer, watching the fish leap and fall, leap and fall. The rhythm becomes hypnotic. Not urgent, not celebratory. Just informative. Like someone knocking gently at a door you didn't realize you had. Time, here, is more than sunrises and meal bells. It's encoded in scales and splashes, in things that don't need to explain themselves. You rise and brush the dust from your knees. The fish have slowed. Only 2 jump in the next 5 minutes. That means the window's closing. Another turn of the seasonal dial. You don't say goodbye to the fisherman. You don't need to. You both read the same clock. And today, the hour is written in ripples. You're slicing green mango in the courtyard thin. Careful pieces for pickling when a gust of wind sneaks up behind you and snatches one right off the cutting board. It flies across the yard like a leaf on a dare. You freeze, knife in midair, and glance up. There's that feeling again. That shiver in the air. And then soft laughter, distant chatter, the clink of jars being unpacked. You don't even need to look. The night market is coming. Mainstream fact. In many traditional Vietnamese villages, night markets weren't fixed weekly events. Instead, they appeared irregularly, often in direct response to shifts in weather patterns, especially changes in wind. A strong evening breeze signalled safe travel, cool temperatures, and the start of informal commerce. You gather the mango and set the knife aside. Around you, the signs multiply. Someone's dragging bamboo mats down the road. A girl runs past carrying a lantern in one hand and a sack of peanuts in the other. Overhead, wind chimes made from snail shells begin to dance. And that's how you know it's real. Because the wind arrived first. Not cold, not stormy, just playful, like a cat weaving through ankles. Fringe tidbit, one riverside community trained their dogs to bark at the first hint of night market wind. When the dogs barked in unison after sundown, vendors started boiling sweet corn within 10 minutes. You head to the village path that leads to the banyan tree where the market always begins. Already, mats are being spread, not in rows, not with signs, just placed. Someone unrolls a cloth filled with fried rice cakes. Another flips open a wooden box of sandalwood combs. The air smells like 5 kinds of smoke and 2 kinds of mischief. But that's normal. Because markets that arrive by wind don't follow rules, they follow momentum. Historians still debate whether this wind signal was merely opportunistic or deeply ritualistic. Either way, for generations, these pop-up night markets regulated everything from trade to gossip. When the breeze blew right, things moved. You pass a stall where a boy is selling lemon salt and roasted peanuts. He winks. You pretend not to see him. That's also part of the ritual. The lanterns bob gently in the shifting air, casting shadows that flicker like they're unsure where they belong. You step carefully over a puddle left by the afternoon drizzle, already dry around the edges thanks to the breeze. That's another sine wind with a drying edge. It means the market will last until midnight. You smile, because you remember years ago when you asked your mother how the market vendors knew when to show up. She didn't say a word. She just held out her hand and let the wind curl around her fingers. Fringe tidbit. Some vendors tied strips of cloth to their wrists. If the cloth moved before sundown, they packed their baskets. If it stayed still, they went to bed early. Entire families planned their income this way. You linger at a basket seller's corner. She offers you one with a loop handle and a faint floral scent. You trade her a scoop of dried mango. No one tracks value. The wind has already approved the exchange. The crowd thickens but never clogs. Voices rise, then soften, as if even conversations are swayed by the breeze. Somewhere a lute is being tuned. Someone else is cracking sunflower seeds like punctuation marks. And above it all, the wind keeps moving unseen, but heard in every clatter, every laughter burst, every flicker of oil flame. You carry your new basket home filled with little nothings roasted peanuts, salted plum, a folded letter someone dropped that might not be for you. But it's not about what you bring back. It's about when you returned. The wind still plays with your hair as you walk. And by morning, the market will be gone. Just footprints. Just scents. Just memories drifting like threads through the air. Because that's how you tell time here. By the wind that builds a market and then takes it away. You're walking the narrow path to the outer shrine, following the scent of sweet basil and wood ash, when something pulls you to a stop, not a sound, not a movement, just a smudge. There, on the surface of a smooth, flat stone nestled beside the base of the shrine wall, it looks like someone pressed their thumb into the rock and left behind a faint, oily mark, except no one touched it. No one ever does. Because that smudge is always there, and it's always different. Mainstream fact: in certain Vietnamese villages, sacred shrine stones, especially those made from river rock, were used as informal lunar indicators. Villagers tracked the changing colour, texture, or moisture of natural blemishes or marks on these stones to approximate moon phases without written calendars. You crouch down and look closer. The smudge today is dark, glossy, almost purple, shaped like a rice grain. That means the moon is past its fullest, and the month is beginning to breathe out. You touch nothing, say nothing, just observe. That's how it's done. Fringe tidbit: some believe that staring too long at the smudge without blinking would give you a headache that revealed which day of the week it really was. One elder used to call it calendar clairvoyance. Others just said he squinted too hard. You hear the clink of incense sticks being placed behind you. A monk in training is sweeping leaves from the steps. He glances down at the smudge and hums. Still holding moisture, he says, so the rains aren't done yet. You nod, you were thinking the same thing. This is not superstition, it's practice, passed down so casually that no one remembers who started it. Just that the smudge has been there for as long as the village has had walls. Some say it first appeared after a lightning strike. Some say it was a spirit's fingerprint. Some say it's just oil from centuries of incense ash and monsoon steam. But everyone agrees it tracks time. You glance around. The old altar is quiet today. No drums, no chanting. Just the soft flutter of paper talismans swaying in the breeze and the deep hum of the earth beneath your feet. The smudge shifts slightly when the light changes. Now it looks like a leafy. That means the moon will vanish soon, 3 nights at most. Then the new month begins. Which means it's time to clear out old debts, replace the house brooms, and finally throw away the bitter pickles no one's touched since the last rain festival. Historians still debate whether shrine smudge watching was symbolic or scientific, but the consistency of descriptions across centuries and regions suggests a form of observational lunar calibration that was both deeply intuitive and incredibly specific. You linger a bit longer, not because the smudge is beautiful, it isn't. It's small, barely noticeable, but it holds something a silence that feels like it knows more than it should. Fringe tidbit. In some villages, girls about to marry would be led to the smudge to see their season. If the mark looked dull and wide, it meant late harvest wedding. If it looked sharp and bright, they'd marry within 3 moons. Eventually, as the monk finishes his sweeping, the wind dies down, you bow once to the stone out of habit and respect and begin walking home. You don't need to tell anyone what you saw. They'll check for themselves. They'll see the mark. They'll feel the air. And they'll know, as you do, the month is closing. The moon is shrinking. And tomorrow, someone will bring the first of the season's mung beans to soak. Not because a bell rang. Not because a paper said so. Because the stone did. You're sitting under the tamarind tree shelling peanuts when a stranger walks by, basket in hand, and asks what day it is. You blink, hesitate, then laugh, not because you don't know, but because in this village, that's the wrong question. There is no Wednesday, no August 3rd, there is after the 5th pebble, there's before the 3rd frog chorus, there is the morning when the moon stopped laughing. And now that you think about it, no one here has said the word calendar in years. Mainstream fact. Many ancient Vietnamese villages relied so fully on environmental cues, cyclical rituals, and oral timekeeping systems that the concept of a fixed written calendar became unnecessary. Time was local, relational, and deeply embodied. You offer the stranger some tea and wave towards the courtyard. It's the day after the fish stop jumping, you say. The looms will creak tomorrow. The stranger blinks, halfway amused, halfway confused. You've seen this before. Outsiders come with pockets full of dates and schedules and leave with a forehead full of shrugged wisdom. You used to use calendars, too. You remember being younger, maybe 10, clutching a folded lunar chart someone gave you from the city. You tried using it for 2 weeks. You got soggy in the rain and blew into the river. And no one went after it. Fringe tidbit, one village used to keep a single copy of the national calendar locked inside the shrine, but no one knew who had the key. Eventually, it was repurposed to press flowers. You walk the stranger around the village, naming days not by number, but by feeling. This is the week where the herbs get bitter. That's the day the cats won't nap in the sun. Tomorrow is when the river rises just enough to touch the 3rd step. She listens, she nods, and then she asks, "But how do you know when to celebrate?" You grin. The flowers tell us. And they do. The peach blossoms appear exactly 10 mornings before Tet. The marigolds arrive 3 before that. The wind gets cheeky, the dogs get jumpy, the incense changes colour. The neighbours start borrowing sugar in pairs. No one misses a thing. Historians still argue whether these local systems represent a breakdown of formal chronology, or a more sophisticated kind of temporal literacy, not time as a rigid line, but as a conversation. You show the stranger the smudge on the shrine rock. She asks who drew it. You say, "The sky." You lead her past the bamboo grove. She asks why the weaving hut is still closed. You say, "The threads aren't ready yet." And you realise something as you say it. This village hasn't forgotten calendars. It's outgrown them. They don't measure time here to control it. They notice it, greet it, breathe with it. Fringe tidbit in a quiet fishing village. The elders voted to burn their only remaining calendar during a new moon. They said, "It doesn't know our tides." They used the ashes to draw tide markers on the floor of the community hut. You walk the stranger back to the path that leads to the outer road. She thanks you and smiles. She still doesn't know what day it is, but she knows when to plant her next thought. Because time here isn't a number on a page. It's a rice bloom. A fish jump. A drumbeat hiding behind the wind. The low hum begins just before sunrise. At first you think it's insects, maybe frogs again, or one of the neighbours' pots boiling over before breakfast, but no. This sound is deeper, slower, like a heartbeat made from wood and memory. You know that sound. You've always known that sound. It's the drum. Mainstream fact. Many Vietnamese villages used a central ceremonial drum not just for festivals or religious rites, but as a communal timekeeper. The rhythm, volume, and timing of each beat conveyed specific information about the day's progress, upcoming events, or the turning of seasons. You throw on a tunic and step outside. The sky is still the colour of old ash, and the first smoke trails are just starting to rise from the cooking hearths. But the drum is already beating from the communal house. Boom, boom, pause, boom, boom. That rhythm means gather tools, don't till yet. A cloud's coming. Your neighbour hears it too and immediately turns around at the well, bucket still dry. That's the power of this drum. It doesn't ask, it informs. Fringe tidbit. Some older villagers swore the drum had a spirit of its own. One legend says if you strike it the wrong way on the first full moon after harvest, it remembers and your family's pigs will never fatten. You make your way to the village centre where the drum sits, enormous and round-bellied, its hide stretched smooth and scarred. One man stands beside it, drumstick in hand, listening as much as striking. No one tells him what to play. He simply knows, and everyone listens. One beat summons the elders. 2 short ones call the weaving mothers. 3 long pulses mean the river has overrun the 3rd bank. You've heard them all. You grew up inside that sound. Historians still argue whether the drum's patterns were taught or inherited. Some say apprentices were trained in the art of communal timekeeping. Others believe the knowledge was passed invisibly through observation, repetition, and that eerie, effortless way tradition wraps itself round breath. You sit near the well and count the next pattern 4 quick taps, followed by a dragging 5th. That one means the rice should be stirred now, not in an hour, not tomorrow. Now. Your cousin hurries past with a basket full of herbs. Did you hear the loop, she asks. You nod. 5th beat was late. She grins. Rain by nightfall. The drum has spoken, and no one doubts it. Fringe tidbit. In some villages, the drum was considered so central that marriages couldn't be official unless it echoed at least once during the ceremony. If it didn't, the couple was encouraged to postpone. By late morning, the beats soften less instruction, more heartbeat. A gentle rhythm that keeps the day from floating off into distraction. And when dusk arrives, it speaks one last time a single deep note, held for longer than seems possible. That's the day's goodnight. Everyone hears it. Everyone understands. You lie in your bed later that night, thinking not about hours or minutes, but about the rhythm that carried you from morning to evening. No one wrote it down. No one asked for proof. But still it held the village together. Because even without calendars, even without bells or clocks. A single drum in the right hands can measure time better than any machine, and just like that, the season has folded itself in half again. You're in the rice field at golden hour, barefoot in the cooling mud, watching the sky melt from mango yellow to dragon fruit pink. There's no ceremony, no signal, but you feel it. Unmistakably, the year is exhaling. This is what the elders call the moment when time falls asleep. Mainstream fact: in rural Vietnamese communities, the slowest, quietest days between planting and harvest weren't wasted, they were cherished. Villagers considered this lull not as downtime, but as a distinct phase of the year, one where nature, work, and even time itself seemed to pause. You sit down in the soft grass beside the paddy, where dragonflies hover like daydreams and the frogs are only half interested in performing. Your hands are still damp from washing taro. The scent of fish sauce lingers in the folds of your sleeves. Somewhere far off, a child is reciting a counting rhyme that doesn't actually count anything. You smile, because there's nothing to do today that can't wait for tomorrow. The bamboo doesn't creak. The fish don't jump. The smudge on the shrine rock has faded to a whisper. Even the wind has tucked itself in. This is not emptiness. It's not laziness. It's rest. And it's earned. Fringe tidbit. One village believed that if you work too hard during these quiet days, the rice would hold a grudge. It'll be stubborn, they said, and you'll taste it in the bowl. You lie back and feel the earth under your spine, warm and slow and certain. You close your eyes and think about how this village has tracked time without paper, without devices, without rules. Smoke trails, frog songs, the return of a muddy buffalo, a thumbprint on stone, a crooked moon, the sound of a loom going quiet. Historians still debate how these systems held together for so long, how people coordinated planting, marriage, trade, and worship without a calendar, but they miss the point. This village doesn't keep time. It lives with it. Not by seconds, by seasons, not by deadlines, by rhythms. Fringe tidbit. In one mountain village, it's said that time once stopped entirely just for a night when a newborn baby laughed during a lunar eclipse. People woke up the next day not knowing how old they were. The village elders shrugged and said, "Start over, then." And maybe that's what this moment is. A soft reset. A breath before the next turn of the drum. You open your eyes. The sky has gone violet now. The fields whisper, but only to themselves. You rise, dust your hands, and walk home slowly, counting not your steps, but the shadows lengthening ahead of you. Because even in this pause, the world continues, quietly, kindly, with no need for numbers, just the knowledge that time is always moving, and sometimes it lets you rest. So now let the day dim around you. Let the fields fade into shadow, the dragonflies settle, the frogs return to their puddles without fanfare. Let the woven rhythms of this village blur at the edges like smoke curling from the last cooking fire. You've walked through a world without calendars. You've watched time counted in wind gusts and fish jumps, in the smell of soil and the silence of looms, in the ripple of river water and the bough of blooming rice. Nothing rushed. Nothing wasted. Every sign carried meaning not in hours and minutes, but in whispers and footsteps and scent. Here you've seen how time was felt, not feared. It came on soft feet. It hummed through the bamboo. It paused to watch the moon. And it told its stories not in ink, but in habit, in the way the villagers knew what to do, when to gather, when to wait, when to rise. Now the lanterns are dimming. The baskets are empty. The wind has nothing left to carry, and neither do you. So rest now. Feel your breath slow to match the tempo of the frogs, the quiet clack of shutters being drawn, the drumbeat of old footsteps fading into night. No more signs to read. No more fish to watch. Only the stillness at the edge of dream. You're right on time.